So, good evening, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and begin. I would like everyone to know in advance that I'm recording this. This is for people who were not able to participate, to be able to see it later. I've called this Spreading the Word because, in fact, it's the result of a UNESCO Train the Trainer workshop that was held here in Paris. And the goal of the workshop was to spread the word about a new methodology created by Darla Deerdorf. And so I am, what do I want to say? I'm upholding my commitment, which was to diffuse it. Please, as you come in, I'm going to give you, and I'm going to do this right now, I'm giving you the right to speak, but would you please turn your microphones off, because I already have some background noise, and I show Agnieszka and Dorothée as having your microphones on. Could you please mute your microphones? And Dorothée Schmidt. Okay, I think we've got it. All right. So I am planning on this being a rather informal webinar. And I thought what I would do is begin by telling you, if I can get it, there we go, by kind of giving you a summary of exactly what the training was about and the methodology called story circles, and give you instructions on how to use it and everything. And then what I would like to do is I will be passing the floor, the microphone, to Benoit Thierry, who is our president here at CHR France, and who also went to the Train the Trainer, and he'll give you some of his feedback, and then we'd like to open it up for you to be able to talk about what you think, what your first impressions are of it. To start, I would like to, so maybe the facts. Where was this? It was held at the UNESCO here in Paris. When? December 10th, right at the beginning of strike time. I walked 10 kilometers that day, okay? It was held from 9:30 to 12:30, so a little half day Train the Trainer workshop. Why? The purpose of the workshop was to promote, train, and multiply users of UNESCO's, it's a recently published tool called Story Circles by Darla Deerdorf. Now, I'd like to start by asking you to tell me a little bit about what you know or what you think about storytelling. So here's two questions for you, just to see a little bit who we have with us and what your experience is with storytelling. So if you would like to answer. Oh, I have storytellers. Uh-oh, now I'm worried. So thank you. Thank you for balancing it out. There are, it looks like, two people who haven't answered yet, is what this is telling me. Okay, I'm going to put an and there we can see that the majority are saying not really. I was surprised that the storytellers were the people who started. Okay, and an essential tool, and people who don't use it. I will be very honest with you. There you are. Does everybody see? I will be very honest with you and tell you that I am not someone myself, although I very much like storytelling. I am not someone who uses it a lot in training. So let's go on. Let me just check and see if there are any questions out there. Okay. So to continue, what's the contents? They called it the backstory. If we take the whole reason for UNESCO, it believes that the cost of intercultural incompetence is much too high in today's world to be ignored. And that one of, and excuse the typo, one of our goals and imperatives for today and the future is to learn how to live together. And learn how to live together in harmony and in peace. And for that, they have a very deep-rooted belief that developing intercultural competence is the best way to foster a culture of peace, which is, you know, it's beginning to be pretty obvious for most people that it's what we need for our survival. So UNESCO and other organizations have addressed the need to develop intercultural competence as well as intercultural dialogue. One of the, I guess I would say maybe one of the conclusions, however, was there's a lot of talk about it. There's been a lot of work defining it, and intercultural competence is something that Darla Deerdorf herself has worked very much on with models and processes and graphs and all of that. But Darla, one of her, what do I want to say? One of her conclusions is that there's a lack of practical methods, approaches, and tools for individuals to use in order to develop intercultural competence and to intercultural dialogue or dialogue between people. So the point is, this manual intends to fill the gap by speaking on an individual level and providing a practical, and I could say from having done it, relatively easy to use tool. All right. So story circles were developed by Darla Deerdorf, and it's based on much of her previous work in intercultural competence. UNESCO with Darla has piloted it around the world. It's been piloted in Thailand, Zimbabwe, Costa Rica, Austria, Tunisia, and they are very interested in continuing to use it and to see it spread far and wide throughout the world. Let me just check. We're doing okay, no questions. So, what is it more specifically? It's a structured, like flexible way for developing intercultural competence. It is people talking about themselves and telling their own personal stories. And for those of you that use it, you don't need to be convinced that the fact is that when people are talking about themselves and talking about things that are important to them, they are really reaching out to others. And they are really speaking in a sincere, authentic way. Okay? What I was very impressed with, and what rung in my ears with the training here, was there's a whole focus on listening to understand. And one of the things that Darla said that just really struck a chord with me was this idea that we listen to respond, we listen to argue, we listen to be able to add in our own experiences, we listen maybe even to share, but often we are, what would I say, maybe like overacting. We are not just taking in and trying really to understand what the other person wants to say. Okay. And that's what story circles, I would say storytelling in the larger sense, and story circles in particular, that's what it's about. It's the sharing of personal experiences within a small group, because groups should be of 4 minimum and 7 maximum. Now we did it and we did it. It's obvious that you can do this with many subgroups, smaller groups. Okay, it is based on 2 presuppositions: that we are all connected through human rights, that each person has an inherent dignity and worth, and at the same time, it's important to remember every person has a personal experience that can be shared. We all have something to learn from others, and listening for understanding is transformational. Okay, the guidelines, and if I could maybe just come back, you have this manual at the very end, my almost last slide. I'm going to show you the website. The manual can be downloaded. It currently exists in French and English. I'm not sure if there are other languages available or not. Okay, so I have obviously taken, the book has, I will tell you, some, well, 100 or so pages. So obviously I have just taken what I consider to be the basics to introduce it to you, to allow you to decide if you want to learn more and if you would like to introduce storytelling, if it has a place in the work that you do. Okay, so what I'm presenting you here is just really the basics. We can talk later at the end about anything that I've said here and what I mean by saying that. Okay, because one of the first things in the guidelines is you need to decide why you're using it. What do you want to get out of it? Why do you have people talking together and sharing personal stories? Okay, then you're going to have to be sure that it's appropriate and feasible. I'll show you in just a couple of minutes. You pretty much need to calculate that you're going to have 90 minutes of training here and facilitating. So you have to be sure that you have that much time, because as it says, last point, you must be sure that there's adequate debriefing and discussion time. Okay. You are also going to be choosing, well, I'll come to that, I'm sorry. You must affirm that all participants are equal. Okay. And that confidentiality is guaranteed. In other words, whatever is said, whatever people might reveal about themselves or their personal experiences stays within the group. Okay. And for that, obviously, you need to create a safe space. And again, I believe that these type of, if I could say, guidelines are true for any self-revealing and personal involvement type activities. Now, here's an outline of a little bit how a session plays out. And so you can count, you're going to have 10 to 15 minutes, which would be welcome, introductions and overview of your activity. 10 minutes to introduce it. And it's recommended that you take the time to say why you're doing it. And that goes back to my previous point. Be sure why you're using it. What do you expect to get out of it? Have instructions for everyone, and you may have to repeat those, obviously. Hand out any handouts. Okay, so you take a little bit of time to really set this up. And then you're going to take a few minutes to form small groups. This is often the most chaotic part of any interactive activity, if I could say. Please note that the story circles themselves take 35 to 45 minutes. Depending, obviously, once again, you're going to organize this according to the number of participants you have. It's obvious that if you have 6 people in a group, it's going to take you longer because everyone has to speak than if you only have 4 people in a group. And if you have 4 groups or 5 groups, it's going to take longer for debriefing and feedback than if you only have 2. Okay. And here it says 15 minutes for the whole group debrief. I think that depends very much on you, realizing that in my experience, debriefing is often the most important part of the activity. Okay, I'll check and see. All right. So, what are the instructions? Your small groups sit in circles. Each person in the group has 2 minutes or less to introduce themselves. Now, and the facilitator is to choose a prompt based on their group and the goals of the group and of using this activity. Okay? Introduce yourself by presenting the place where you were born and grew up, or by presenting your job today and what you consider to be your most important responsibilities, your goals in life, your goals for this year. All right. And the booklet there again offers any number of prompts for you to choose from in doing this a first time, or if you're not sure. Okay. The point is obviously also at this point, step 1, to be sure that you are giving the people in your groups a chance to get to know each other. This is where you're going to build trust and the safe place for people to reveal something more about themselves. Okay? The rule, and the strict rule here for everyone else, is no interruptions, comments, or questions. Everyone just takes turns to talk. And there is a strict 2 minutes or less, time period on this. Okay. Second phase, 3 minutes or less for each person in the group to talk about, and once again, it's you, the facilitator, that chooses the subject matter. And again, that depends on your group. Where does this fit in your training? What are your goals for this? Because it's obvious too that if you're working with, say, a migrant population or a refugee population, or working with people who are working with those publics, or students starting out in an international program, or students in their first week in their new school. If they're on one of those, I'm thinking of a study abroad program, okay? Are you working with possibly a team or a group of people where there is a problem of communication and a problem of getting along? All of these are the kinds of information that you will use to decide what stories you want people to tell. Once again, this is a stage for no interruptions, no comments or questions. Everyone gets to speak for a strict time limit, okay? But they get to speak freely without being deviated or detoured by questions or comments or interruptions from other members of their group. Step 3, and this is once all the stories are told, it is called flashback time. This is now the time when other members of the group address and talk themselves, if I could say, tell their own stories about what, I don't know how to say, what they are taking away from what another member of the group said. So you go around very simply, and one by one, everyone in the circle, you start with the first person who told their story, and everyone else in the group, not that person, takes very short time, 15 seconds only, to kind of feed back what they heard, what struck them, what sticks in their mind, okay? And you are to do this process with everyone in your group, so that everyone, after speaking now, hears what the other members of the group are taking away, what they were impressed with, what they were possibly surprised by. Once again, in a sense of openness, equality, and care for each other. Just checking. Okay, we're good. So tips, and there are tips and guidelines obviously in the book. You must have timekeepers, because in order for one of the aspects that I think, people participating in it will probably complain about and probably become frustrated sometimes, is that there needs to be a certain amount of discipline, and the time needs to be respected. From that point of view, I'm not saying it has to be I think you could decide to have 2 minutes if you have that amount of time to work with people. But once you have set the time, it needs to be respected by everyone in the group. For that, you should have timekeepers. And the method that was used when we did the workshop was that everyone in the group took the role of timekeeper for, say, the person on their left or the person on their right. So that in turn, each person in the group is responsible for making sure another member of the group respects the time limit. Okay, the idea being that then you don't have a bad guy in the group. Okay, take the time to brief and set up the activity so that people kind of know what they're doing, what they're going to do, why they're doing it, and what the rules are. Insist on the rules, okay? And the rules are to respect each other, to listen for understanding, okay? And choose the prompts, the material, the content that you put in carefully, that it's appropriate to what you want to get out of this activity. Here you go. It's here. All of this is downloadable. Okay. So, would you like me? Hang on. You know what I will do? I'm going to put it in the chat box. Can I get it? No. Sorry, I'll come back to it. All right. So now what I would like to do is open it up for you. Do you have questions? What is, if I could say, what is your initial reaction to this method? And sorry, before I do that, what I want to do is give the floor to Benoit. Hello, Benoit. Can you turn on your camera so we see you?
Well, I don't know exactly how to put on the camera, but can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. Can everyone else hear Benoit? Yes, it looks like people can. So go ahead. And excuse me for having, I've asked Benoit to talk because I thought it was good to have somebody's reaction to the methodology, because Benoit has some ideas that not necessarily all of us have. who did I see? I saw that, just 1 second. After Benoit speaks, somebody had their hand up. And now I don't see it. Anyway, go ahead, Benoit, and tell us your feedback on the methodology.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda, and good evening to everybody. Well, I would like to develop 2 points. The first one is a testimony about the application, the practice we did in the group of 5 people where I was at UNESCO, to give you a concrete idea of how this method works. And my second point would be to tell in a few words my thinking or my questions about the possible use of this method. So first, my experience of the game itself, I was part of in this session in UNESCO. So as Linda was saying, there was third and in fact 4 steps in this game. First one, the introductions. Second one, the storytelling. Third one, flashback. And in addition, in this group, there was a discussion about what was learned in this experience. So the first step, the introductions of everyone to the other members of the group, and we were 5 people. What was a bit surprising was that the introductions were more or less formal according to the people, with very different styles. I can quote 3 short examples. One participant said only his name, Giorgio, but he found a way not to say anything about himself. He only spoke about various cultures in Latin America, so we could presume that he was himself originated from Latin America. Another one presented a very good CV in an assertive style. So we could understand she was a very good professional, at least from her opinion. And another one spoke only about her personal life, her personal family, her religion, her relation within his family, her family, sorry. So it was very personal. So I was surprised by these very different styles in the introductions. Second step, the stories. So some stories were about intercultural experiences, probably because many of the people who were in this session in UNESCO worked in this context of intercultural communication and management. And personally, I was part of these people, and I told an experience I got in a meeting in Morocco. Other people spoke about personal experience of relation with someone else, but not necessarily in a foreign context or in an intercultural context. Then the third step was about the flashback. So it was interesting to receive the perceptions of the other people about me or only about my story or about my emotion I had in the story or the emotion my story gave to the others. But of course, with these people at UNESCO, the feedback was generally kind, benevolent, and polite. So this is my experience, which gives you a concrete idea, I suppose, of what could be the course of the method. Now, what are my questions about this method? And I would like first to emphasize on the fact that for me, storytelling is a method, but the question is where, when, for what purpose to use it? What is the objective? What is the goal? I have the feeling that it might be used in mediation situation, but personally, I'm not a specialist of mediation, so I will not go ahead. Now, I am more accustomed to training situations, and I would like to say a few words about this training situation. I think it can be adapted under two conditions. The first one is to have a group or a subgroup which is small, because it is supposed to be around 5 people. So you cannot manage that with 12 or 20 people, or you have to split in subgroups. And in what purpose can it be used? Well, I would see well this exercise first as an icebreaker, maybe an icebreaker which might be more involving that other plays, other games, because it's more personal. But a situation in which it would be adapted from my point of view is when we have to constitute, to form, to put together a training group, especially for an intensive or for a long training, which requests that the people know well each other and are able to work together in a good confidence, with the perception that he knows well the other people and their reactions. So from my point of view, it would not be very necessary in a short session, but in a long training, when you have to get a united group, or at least a group where people understand well each other, it will be adapted. So this was there was my first reflections about this method. Now I give back the speech to Linda and to your questions if you like.
Okay, so everybody would really like to hear from you, have your questions, your ideas. If you raise your hand, do you have the capacity to raise your hand? Do you have an icon for that? Or type in the chat box. I can give you the microphone so that we can, hear actually your voice. Benoit was not the only person to come up at the end of the workshop and say, I'm not quite sure how this would fit into a bigger training program. I'm not quite sure how I would use it. So does anybody have any questions? Would you like to know more? Yes? Nothing? That's okay too. Mithun, you're activated, I believe. Yes, I can
Yes,
hear you.
hello.
Good,
Okay.
hi.
Hi. I just wanted to give one feedback is that I have attended a keynote speech and a training from someone. I think he's based in Los Angeles or San Francisco. His name is Joe Lambert, and he has created an institution about storytelling, and he creates short films, like 1 to 2 minute films, which are very personal about people who have been through the change, about communities. And it's very, very interesting. Let me find exactly um, there is a, I can send it through chat, the group
Yeah,
of speech that he where he speaks about his method, and I think it's very complementary to what you've been saying about your feedback from this manual. So I will send you the link to his website, and I'll send you a link to his TEDx speech where he speaks about how this method works. And I think it's again the similar thing. I have used this principle in making people talk about a specific topic, and I know it works. So I think I'm very much I agree on the feedback of Benoit. I think absolutely you have to know what result you want to achieve, and accordingly you have to use this tool, because there are lots of codes, especially when we're doing a training in an organization where you have people from different layers of management involved. They are not very open to talking or speaking out about their personal stories, or they might keep it for some informal meetings and not for a formal training. And that's where it is tricky to have this kind of method in a formal intercultural training for organizations.
yes. It's one of the things that they emphasize a lot in the manual and that they emphasize during the training too, which is that this whole idea of equality of everyone in the group, the confidentiality, and the open space. So obviously, if you're working with hierarchical questions, then there's you definitely have to take that into account from the very beginning. Catherine, you have a question. I'm activating your microphone, and I've opened the book to some of the questions, because you asked about the prompts.
Yes.
For round 2, yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you
Okay.
very well.
Okay, thanks.
So,
yeah, what kind of prompts were they used, or were they using, or what kind of themes, or any directions, anything?
yeah, well, again, I have a few here. The manual gives you it gives you kind of like the fundamentals and the bottom line, and then it goes through experiences they've had in each of the places that I mentioned earlier. And so it gives you other things. To give you an example, you can start with something. This would be, I would say, for like an introductory course, okay? Mm-hmm. And it says that would be, what is one of the most positive interactions you have had with a person who is different from you? And what made this such a positive experience? Okay? What is your earliest memory of difference? Okay? What is a memorable experience you've had with a person who is different from you. So you can see that in these first three, we're dealing with what's your experience of difference and how have you reacted to it. Okay?
Okay.
Here's further on, describe a time when you realized you believed in a stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? About a group you are part of or a group that you are not part of. Okay? What is a metaphor from your own experience that illustrates how a culture clash can be overcome? So once again, I think these are good examples of the way you choose your questions, depending on what you're doing with this. Are you trying to get people to agree on something? So it could be, what is your definition of, I don't know, a good project development? Or are you introducing the idea of stereotypes, bringing it down to a personal, individual level? Okay. Are you thinking about how can we overcome cultural conflicts? All of these are, part of the questions you need to do. Now, there was someone else. Yes. Hang on. I'm going to go to, it's Cora, and I will activate your microphone because you're asking, what do we mean by a long training? And that would be a question for you, Benoit. Are you still there? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. What was the question?
What do you mean by a long training? When you talked about this would be better in a long training.
Okay. Well, clearly I have in mind our experience in theater France, which is a trainer's training. The duration of which is 14 days. So we have to form a group where people know well each other. We didn't use this method, and we had a strong group anyway, but it could be probably a method at the beginning of this type of training.
Okay. And also I wanted to say, because Mitoon, you can all see, has put the information about Joe Lambert in the chat box. CETAR France is having Joel Brown in Montpellier on the 21st of March, who will be working on the concept of story listening. Nanette, you've asked to say a few words, and I have activated your microphone. You need to.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Yes, I just wanted to share a few feedback on the storytelling. My first experience actually using it was as a participant through another association who you're familiar with, Elan Intercultural, and they deal with helping people that are immigrants when they arrive here in France. And one of the purposes of using storytelling was to demonstrate to immigrants that they have all of these resources in them, but they don't really know that they have them. So through storytelling and by telling a story about their experiences and their challenges when arriving in France, when they speak it out and they verbalize what they experienced, they're actually developing the competencies that they have inherent in them, such as perseverance, resilience, empathy, and all of these things. When you're telling it, the person who is listening to you also is further developing his own skills. So it's transformational on both sides for everybody who is interacting. And I felt that as a participant, it was a very powerful tool because people feel psychologically safe. I mean, you have to create that environment so that they're able to talk about themselves. But I fully agree with what you said and what Benoit said, that it is a powerful tool, and when used the right way, it can be extremely effective.
That is also one of Darla's very strong things, is the listening for understanding, and that listening for understanding is transformational when you truly listen to others. And thank you really for sharing that, because I think that's a very good point, the way it can be used to help people, and to help people see themselves in a different light.
Because actually the person who is listening is writing down all of these competencies that the person has, but they don't realize that they have them. And then when you do the debrief, you kind of share what you heard, and the person says, hey, yeah, I do actually know how to do that, or I have that competency already.
Yes, thank you. And because I also think that one of the things that is important, I would say, to storytelling in general, is I do believe it needs rules. Because it needs rules, it needs to be structured. Otherwise, it becomes what we do every day, which is not listen to each other while we're talking. I mean, that was my revelation from doing this activity, is that I just feel like I'm a pitiful listener. You know, I always have something else turning around in my mind. So anyway, more about debriefing. I have Agnieszka. Let me activate your microphone. And you would like to know more about debriefing. How should you do it well? Let me see if my little manual has. Go ahead and talk to us, Agnieszka. Are you there? I have activated your microphone. You need to turn it off now. Turn it on your side. So yes, but we don't hear you yet. Are you speaking? I can't. Are you speaking, Agnieszka? Because we can't hear you. I'm looking to see if there is like a specific debriefing and discussion questions. Aha. So, debriefing questions. First of all, I would say that in debriefing, you need to start by making it as open as possible and allowing people to express what they felt, what they lived. Usually, classic debriefing is the type of what happened, how do you feel, or how do you feel, what happened, what does it mean, and how does it relate to real life? Okay, or how does it relate to your life? It's important for everyone to be able to express themselves. So now it says here, the original block that I gave you said 15 minutes. It says right away here, they should only be used, story circles should only be used if there's enough time for the debriefing and discussion. A minimum of 30 minutes is recommended. Okay? So, what is memorable to you in what you heard? What surprised you? What challenged you in the stories you heard? What did you learn about yourself through this experience? What common themes did you hear from the stories? So there's 12 listed here, and there are some variations afterwards. Okay, again, this is easily, and let me put it one last time in here in the chat box, the link to be able to download the material from internet. Okay, so there's a lot of things, and obviously you start maybe with something you feel comfortable with that is in your style, and then slowly but surely, as you manage to do these type of things and use storytelling, you'll be able to, what do I want to say? You'll be able to adapt, enlarge, get more specific or less specific. Are there any other questions? Or last comments? So if not, I'm going to say goodbye with the picture of all of us who attended the workshop. I want to say thank you very much to all of you. And I have a last poll that I can give you. Wait a minute. Let's wait. Wrong. Here we go. Sorry. If you would like to give feedback on this, on our little webinar, I've put up our evaluation for you. How many debriefing questions would you suggest? It depends on how far you want to go and how much time you have. The importance of debriefing is that everybody says what they want to say or need to say. They get things off their chest, if I could say, if this has been, particularly if this has been an important experience for them. The importance of debriefing also, essential, is to connect it to your learning goals. What did you want them to get out of it? Okay. I would say with storytelling, you don't want people to go away with the simple idea that, gee, it was nice listening to people talk. You want to do something with the learning in order to make it stick. I would say that fewer questions are better than more, fewer but pertinent. And if you've had any practice or noticed, if you get into or questions, people only answer the last one. So it's best to kind of isolate and stay, what do I want to say? I'm not finding my word. Stay simple in what you're asking. Okay, has everybody answered theirs? Only 3 questions, perfect. Not very taxing. Or do we have any last questions before I say thank you very much? Thank you, I have truly enjoyed it. Okay. And it looks like you have too. Thank you, I really appreciate it. And good evening, have a very nice evening. Thank you.